Welcome one, welcome all to another Friday night episode of eXhuming the X-Files. My name is Matthew. He is Jeremy.
How do you do?
And tonight, we are graced with another episode from writer Darren Morgan. He previously wrote Humbug and Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. So now we have his third written episode, War of the Coprophages. As I always ask, did you remember this episode from when you were a kid?
Uh, no, and I'm thankful that I.
Really? Oh, really? Because I remember this episode a lot when I was a kid because it reminded me of the Creep Show episode with the guy with all the cockroaches and stuff like that. And this really stood out in my mind for whatever reason as being really interesting with robot bugs. Are we going to have opposite takes on this episode?
I saw the episode title and I was really worried it was going to be about poop.
Well, it kind of is a little bit.
I mean, you saw coprophages, and the only thing I know is copra is the beginning of coprophiliac, and those are people who can only have sex or reach sexual gratification through poop. And I'm like, what am I going to watch? Oh no!
All right,
and then I hit play.
Let's see what happens. What happened when you hit play on that prologue?
Behold the mighty cockroach. A fucking weirdo starts just cranking out. He picks up this this fucking cockroach off the wall and holds it way too close to his mouth. And just starts talking about facts about how they're the perfect creature, immune from radiation. They have billions of kids a year, and
we are gods, and we must treat them accordingly.
And you realize it's just an exterminator talking to the guy whose house he's at.
Yeah.
And he's like, "What is it? Is it?" The guy asks him, "Hey, is it true if you decapitate one of them that they run around and just stay alive without a head until they starve to death?" It's like, after all those facts, they're like, "Hey, look, buddy, I just kill them." Like, what? Where's the scientist I was just listening to?
It's supposed to be funny, Jeremy.
It was, and it was funny. And then he sees a cockroach that's, as he's walking around spraying this poison around the house. He sees this cheeky Joe's apartment cockroach just out on a cabin. It's like, oh, you're brave or whatever. And he knocks him to the floor, steps on him, but as he steps on him, he starts to have a heart attack or something, some sort of reaction that's killing him. And he backs over to a wall, and like all of these cockroaches are pouring out through this hole in a brick wall. And then they're all over him. And then like he falls over, and there's this scene where this dude falls over to the floor and he's covered in cockroaches, and they hold the shot on him for a minute.
Yeah.
As the cockroaches they put on his shirt start running up towards his neck, and I'm like, oh, that had to feel gnarly.
Yeah.
Actor's perspective. That was so gross.
Wouldn't it have been incredible if they were... I obviously, he's already been in a great episode, and you can't do it, but what if they would have had Brad Dourif play the exterminator here?
I would have accepted it, just as is. Like, oh, Brad Dourif had a twin. Brad Dourif.
Yeah, but I don't know if it wouldn't work in the timeline, but if it's like just I don't care about canon. Just take Brad Dourif's character from Graveyard Shift and make him the exterminator in this. It's like the same exterminator in here. It would have been incredible. He would have brought that opening monologue. He would have brought so much pathos to it. It would have been incredible.
But it would have been like more blue balls than seeing Lee Ermey in the previous episode die before the title screen.
That's true.
I would have been mad the rest of the episodes. Yeah. Like, you had that acting talent, you let him in here for 5 minutes. Thanks.
True.
But so yeah, he dies. He's covered in cockroaches. It's nasty. I write that a lot in my notes, and then we get the title screen.
Yeah. I love this opening. I thought this opening was funny. I thought it was interesting. I love the guy who was like scared of the bugs, where he's like, "Oh, insects, they just." Ugh. I thought he's really good throughout like this episode, but I remember as a kid seeing this guy covered in cockroaches and being horrified. Like, I'm not scared of bugs or anything like that, but there's something about them being on me that just creeps me out. Like the other day, I was just sitting upstairs and I felt something on my hand, and I looked, it was just an ant. And I have no problems with ants, but I just had this visceral reaction and
And
flicked it off my hand as quickly as I possibly could.
share a personal story with you. I am with you in that I don't have a fear of bugs, but there's a peace accord that I have with most creepy crawlies is that you don't invade my personal space. I will do everything in my power not to invade your personal space. When I first moved back to Nebraska after chasing one of acting talent that we had in the Grand Horror, Ryan Brooks, it chased her out to California. We lived in Sacramento for a little while, then we moved back to Nebraska and moved into her parents' basement. Wasn't the best call I ever had. I enjoyed living there. They were very, very nice people. They had a lake a few yards behind their house that I could go bass fishing without a license every
Yeah,
day.
I
Like
remember that lake.
it was not a bad place to live. However, it was 50 yards away from a lake, kind of out in the country. So there were bugs in the basement, as there normally are. I She had a problem with sleeping, in that she couldn't fall asleep easily. Once she got to sleep, she couldn't maintain it that way, and oftentimes she wouldn't fall asleep until about 4 a.m. She'd stay asleep until like 10 a.m., something crazy like that. So I couldn't toss and turn, and I'm kind of a tossing and turning guy. But there was one night where I felt there were big spiders. This is country
Yeah,
Nebraska spiders. They not Australia big, but probably bigger than a quarter sometimes.
and
And I
hairy.
I sleep, bare ass in my underwear. And one night, like I felt it just crawling on my leg or something, and I got out of the bed and I'm like, and it woke her up, and she was not easily angered by anything. She was as even keeled a human being as I've ever seen,
Yeah,
and she dressed my ass down. Not only that night, but the following morning. About it's like that is completely on. I can't. I can't get to sleep. I'm like, well, fuck. What am I supposed to do?
let it
Not a week.
crawl.
Not a week later, I'm spooning with her, and this is just as she's starting to fall asleep. I'm laying on my left side. She's laying on her left side. I feel this motherfucking spider just crawling
Same one.
right up my spine. I don't know. Maybe it felt big as fuck, and it was crawling straight up the side of my back. It crawled over my fucking chest cavity and down in between us, and she burst out of bed as soon as that fucker was crawling on her. And I'm like, we had such a huge fight about that. So no, I got a peace cord. I am okay with certain helpful creatures, especially spiders, being
Yeah,
around the house because they do keep track of pests. Just don't be
yeah.
on me, and
I
don't be places I need to be.
yeah, I should point out, just for the record, I say I'm not scared of bugs or anything. There is one exception to that, and that's a tick. I am terrified of ticks. But the general insect kingdom, I'm totally fine with. Just don't put a fucking tick on me, and I'll be okay.
All right, so now that we've bared our soul to
Well,
23 strangers on the internet,
how do you feel about cockroaches?
cockroaches are fucking gross.
Okay, like
They're just nasty. Like I remember reading or hearing a story on NPR once about some guy who was visiting a missionary down in South America or something like that. And through that story, I found out that humans, if you get exposed to enough cockroach shit, that as a human being, you become incredibly allergic to those cockroaches, like almost death causing allergy that humans just get by being exposed to poop. And it was a reason that this missionary or whatever that he was working with is unable to drink pre-ground coffee. He has to go get his own beans and grind them himself because there's such a cockroach problem around machines that grind up beans. I
yeah,
thought that was gross to
yeah.
find out, but
When I lived in California, we didn't live in the greatest of places. Obviously, a lot of very low income apartments. I would remember as a kid where I would like turn the lights off and I'd wait and I'd flick the lights on and you would see all the cockroaches that were on the walls go scurrying in the light trying to hide and stuff like that because it was like, oh yeah, in California especially, cockroaches everywhere. It's hard to not have them in your house. They find their way in. And yeah, I had many a tussle. I've murdered many a cockroach in my day.
Gross, Matt.
Yeah,
Sorry you had to live like that, but
yeah.
oh god, this episode just gave me the willies, and they did. I mean, they purposefully did this. This is one of those goofy episodes that they've made that just really, really works all the way through it.
Yeah.
You can see that they had fun with it. They had fun screwing with the audience a little bit about it, and I enjoyed it on that front. But God, this episode was gross too. So after the title screen, now that we've talked forever about that, Mulder is just sitting somewhere in his car in the dark, knocking bugs off his windshield with his wipers, and he just calls Scully, and he's just like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just sitting here drinking."
Just hanging around.
And it sets the tone for the weirdest set of conversations I've seen between Mulder and Scully in any of the episodes. Every time they talk to each other, they both sound like they're stoned out of their gourd, and they're just like, "Hey, man, what are we talking?" Like he,
Yeah, they're just relaxing. Like, I mean, there's a sequence in here where Scully's just sitting in her apartment eating out a tub of ice cream. They're
yeah,
just they're just chilling, man. They're just chilling. They're talking
and
like normal humans.
he's asking questions about the night sky, and are aliens really out there, dude? And Scully's like, probably not. It's very improbable. Like, she states all of these facts about what it would take to create life, and it's probably very improbable. So his next question is, "Hey, Scully, what are you wearing?"
So funny.
A cop pulls up out of the blue, just sees a dude parked in his car, comes over, and he's just like, "Hey, what are you doing out here?" And it's like, "Well, just sitting here, just thinking about stuff." And he asks to see his credentials, shows him his FBI badge. Like, okay, what the fuck is an agent doing out here? Well, you guys had a bunch of UFO sightings last night. And it's like, have you got any of the reports today? It's like, nope, we haven't got any reports today about it. So the cop is aware that there was a bunch of UFO sightings the previous night, of which we never talk about for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, and what's interesting is the cop even says like, "Well, you guys investigate that kind of stuff?" Like the
Didn't he
FBI.
say like, not really, or
Yeah,
something like that?
yeah. He goes, not really.
Yeah.
But the cop thought that he was waiting for a drug dealer because that comes up
Yeah,
later on.
yeah. He says, he's like, well, who's that on the phone? Your drug dealer?
Yeah.
Uh,
There's a lot of
and
stuff in this episode. Darren Morgan writes these just funny episodes. He does a really good job of setting up a bit and paying it off later on down in the episode. And there's this running gag throughout this, which we'll talk about with Mulder on the phone with Scully, them trying to decide whether or not Scully should come out to Massachusetts. It's just fucking hilarious. It just keeps amplifying as the episode goes and gets funnier and funnier and funnier.
so the cop all of a sudden needs to be called away because there's been another roach attack. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, that's the third person that's been killed by roaches that day. Like, Mulder, you were out here to investigate UFOs from the previous night. How have you not heard that roaches are killing people in this town?
Just been sitting in his car.
And then he calls, what is it? He calls Scully, and the cop's like, "Hey, who's that on the phone?" He's like, "That's my drug
Yeah,
dealer."
this is my drug dealer. Because they're looking at the exterminator, and Mulder calls up Scully. He's like, Scully, you got to get up here. I'm looking at this guy. He's covered in cockroaches, or he was covered in cockroaches, and he's been killed, whatever. And then Scully I don't know if she's eating the ice cream at this point. She's just doing something. And she's like, "Oh no, it was probably this, and this." And then he's just like, oh, you're right. Nah, you don't need to come down. Don't worry. Don't worry. It
And then
starts.
calls her like 5 minutes later, like, nah, maybe you should come.
Yeah,
But so yeah, he makes the joke about Scully being the drug dealer, and it immediately segues to some kids that are smoking some crazy stuff out of some beakers. Like, you got to try this.
yeah,
And those kids, like, they were huffing Jenkum out of beakers. You remember the Jenkum scare back in the 90s?
I do not. Tell me more.
There was a bunch of scares that would just show up in pop culture, like in the
Yeah,
early 90s, late 80s. It was everybody was afraid of Dungeons and Dragons. And then that
satanic
kind of,
panic and stuff like that.
yeah, and yeah, my mom told me, like, don't do that, don't play with a Ouija board, stuff like that. And then, things would just show up, like, watch for holes in the ground so you don't get stuck in a pipe like baby Jessica, or there's razor blades inside of the apples got turned
Yeah,
into, like, they drug people are dusting children's candy with PCP. Like, it was always something new that was going on. And, like, I want to say around the time the episode this happened, there was a bunch of farm communities saying that these kids are grabbing a paper plate, a wide paper plate, poking straws through the paper plate, covering the paper plate over a cow patty, and putting the straws up their nose and just sniffing the methane that came off of it in order to get high. Now,
weird.
that may have happened somewhere, but I remember it being like, hey, kids, don't fucking sniff cow shit and get high.
Yeah.
You find out that those kids were like brewing up turds and huffing it.
I like the
Um,
girl where the guy's trying to convince her to do it, and he's like, "Hey, man, this will stretch your mind," and she's like, "I don't think you two," or how does she phrase it? She's like, "I don't think my mind is what you two want to stretch," or something like that. I was like,
wow,
"That's a little risque for this
I'm
episode."
I missed that.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
she says that.
okay, so she's hanging out with a couple of losers because she's fixing to get the old DP going on. Good for her. That's progressive in '95. So, so they the kid that's like trying to sell sniffing jankum to the girl all of a sudden sees this. It's such a gross scene.
Yeah.
He's got a roach suddenly on his arm, and it starts crawling into a hole that's on his arm. And I don't know
Yeah.
how they filmed it. If maybe they just stuffed a roach into a hole and then filmed it backwards and then just perfected it going forwards. But there was another one where it was crawling like ice underneath his skin, and then there
Mhm.
was another one that went into a hole. So he grabs a razor and starts cutting on himself to get these roaches out of his skin, and it was so nasty.
Yeah. That's one of the moments that I really remember as a kid because that's what reminded me of the Creep Show. I think it's called they're crawling up on you or something, whatever the episode of Creep Show is called, with the guy who's like a germaphobe and he's trying to kill all the cockroaches, and at the end they start crawling underneath his skin and out of his mouth and his eyeballs and stuff like that. Very Creep Show esque.
It was gross.
Yeah.
But his friends tackled him, and I don't know if he died from it or what, but Mulder's investigating that. They don't see any roaches at that point. He calls Scully again in one of these stoned conversations. And this is like, late night. Kids are huffing jankum at midnight or something like that. And she is washing Queequeg
Yeah,
in
Queequeg
her
sighting.
in her sink. Like, there's one reason you're going to be washing your dog at midnight on the East Coast, and that's because that dog shit its fur. But
Man, this is all this the shit in this episode.
uh, um, oh, God, there's this nasty. Mulder keeps asking. That's what I wrote. Mulder keeps asking Scully to come up, and she keeps saying, "Nah."
Well, she keeps coming up with an excuse. She's like, "Oh, well, that guy probably just died of egg bomb syndrome," and he's like, "Egg bomb syndrome," and she's like, "Oh yeah, if you sniff this or blah blah blah, it has some sort of reaction and drops dead. Look at his eyeballs or whatever." And Mulder's like, "Oh yeah," and she's like, "Still want me to come up?" He's like, "Nope, it's nothing. Sorry, I keep calling you."
So this is the part that really grossed me out at this point was Mulder picks up a roach and he crushes it in his hand
Yeah.
and he gets this roach juice
Yeah.
all over his hand. He's like kind of smearing it around a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, no.
That's where they find
Um,
out it's made of metal. The shell.
yeah, yeah. He suspect because of how it shatters. It's just like full of juice and it's made of metal. He goes to a doctor to. Why does he go to the doctor? Did he get cut from the metal on his hand?
I think that the doctor was like trying. Yeah, I think it kind of like sliced him up a little bit, or whatever, and the doctor was cleaning off all the juices that were all over, might infect it.
But the doctor's like, "Hey, man, you're in the know. What is really going on in this town? And do I
Yeah.
need to pack my family up and leave?" And Mulder's kind of being a dick about it. He's like, of all the people that believe in stuff that's going on that the government could be doing and just grasping at straws in order to maintain his own narrative, how he just disses this guy for coming to that conclusion about the he tells him about the or some government agency bought this house in town and that's when the cockroaches like showed up and
Well,
he just dismisses him. He doesn't
well,
give him an answer.
yeah. That's the thing, because the guy's asking, because everybody in this town thinks that the FBI knows what's really going on. But the doctor is like, do I need to get out of here? And Mulder's like, how would I know? Like, I kind of understood Mulder in that point, because he literally has no idea what's going on. But he's just like, I don't know, dude. And the guy gets him. I love his line where he's talking to the sheriff, whatever. He's like, I gotta go. He's like, after talking with Agent Mulder, I feel slightly constipated.
Constipated. And he goes to actually take a shit and then
Yes,
gets attacked by cockroaches that are in the bathroom.
so much pooping in this episode.
But then like some orderly at the hospital finds the body, sees him covered in cockroaches. Mulder calls up Scully and says, "You gotta come now. This is real." And Scully's like, "Well, look at his eyeballs. Nope,
Yes.
he had an aneurysm. I'm not coming." And it's like,
You
it's
didn't find this funny? Like, I thought this back and forth was
oh yeah, it
hilarious.
was the whole episode was supposed to be. I think this is one of it was what Humbug and then this one that they do these cutesy little episodes once or twice a season where it's supposed to be kind of funny, kind of whimsical, whatever, and it really works in this episode. It was just
Yes.
really, it was just weird sometimes
Yeah.
seeing everybody just being so aloof.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same writer, Darren Morgan. He did Humbug and he did Clyde Bruckman's Final Repos. So, and the sad thing is, he only does, I think, 2 or 3 more episodes of the X Files.
Ooh.
Sad.
Well, yeah, thanks for that news, Matt. Okay, so uh and then we get to the scene where Mulder is going to go to this government facility that the doctor was talking about, this house or whatever. And as he's hopping the fence, Scully talks to him and says,
Yes.
"Don't go breaking into another government facility." And he's like, "Well, too late. I'm
Too
in."
late.
And she immediately changes her tone. It's like, "Oh, well, what do you see?"
Well, see, I love how the writer Darren Morgan, that he recognized that Mulder's constantly breaking the law, so he made a joke about it, like just literally like, "Don't do this. You're breaking the law again." Oh no, and then they just move right on, because he's like, it's like the meta commentary of how we don't really care that Mulder breaks the law all the time. We're just there to get the story that we want to see.
And so he breaks in, and of course, cockroaches just start pouring out of the walls. And then this other agent, they call it Doctor Bambi. Um,
Well, wait a minute. Before she shows up, what's hilarious? He's on the call with Scully, and he's explaining the walls are crawling, like they're moving, And Scully's like, "What?" Like she's all sort of concerned, and she's like, "You got to get out of there, Mulder. You got to get out of there." When he's like, he's because Mulder's freaking out. There's cockroaches all. He's like, "They're on me. They're on me." And then the light comes on. You don't actually see Bambi yet. And then as you just see Mulder, he's like, "Gotta go," and he just hangs up on Scully.
And he does that like 3 different times in this
It gets
episode. Like leaves her
funnier every
screaming,
time.
Mulder!
Yeah, it gets funnier every time.
But then it's this hot ass doctor. And I actually had to look it up because I'm like, all right, we're in season 3. David Duchovny finally, or probably has a lot of notoriety because of this show. People are looking at him. He's getting a lot more popularity. You know, he's graduated from the dogs he was dating and inviting in to be guest actresses in the first couple of seasons.
Harsh.
It's like I had to look up. It's like this girl is so hot and also his type, but hot. There's like this gal had to have dated him, and he just brought her into the show. That wasn't the case at all.
Oh.
However, she was in Showgirls as a stripper. Briefly.
Hold on, I'm looking up at her IMDb right now.
She has an amazing rag.
She has an amazing rag. Bobby Phillips. Hold on, let me look. I've never looked this girl up. I'll have to find this amazing rack that you're talking about.
Well, speaking of it, they start talking. Well, I'll just continue in the show while you're looking this up. Mulder is pretending that the things she's saying about bugs is the most interesting thing in the world because this girl is just a smoke show, and he's just staring at her the whole time.
She was in an episode of Red Shoe Diaries.
Yeah, she was.
Okay.
Let me see what. And then there's the scene where they're point blank staring at each other's face, and while they're talking, Mulder just straight looks at her tits and then looks back up at her face. I wish I had recorded the timestamp that came from. It's like, why did you keep that take? It wasn't supposed to be something flirty. He's just talking, and then he just looks down at her tits and then looks at her face. Like he couldn't help himself.
Well, he does that thing too when he uses his hands. Like he lifts his hands up and like squeezes, and then looks back down. Like, oh, he talks to her. There's all kinds of little funny things.
Oh yeah, his phone rings and he doesn't even he answers it. He's like, "Not now,
not now," because it's Scully calling him. He's like, "Not now." Click. Just hangs up. It's good. I love her theory of what UFOs are, where she's just like, because she's got this bug on this like weird zapper thing or whatever, and she can. I guess she's like the insects, like UFOs are nocturnal insect swarms. When they go through like an electromagnetic field or something, they light up, and that explains the strange movements that people see and how they disappear. And like Mulder is just like, mm-hmm. Nocturnal insect swarms, huh? Did I ever tell you how interested I am in insects?
And so he goes home alone, or he goes back to his hotel room alone. He falls asleep and then wakes up or they're talking about these roaches, how they does roaches ever get on humans? Can roaches be attracted to humans? And she's like, no, but they do crawl up your nose sometimes. And in the he goes to sleep, and he has this scene where he just wakes up and starts going because he must have been having a dream about a roach crawling up his nose. What a horrible way to wake up.
Yeah.
And he calls to wake up Scully in the middle of the night and says, I met this doctor, Dr. Bambi. And she's like, the doctor's name is Bambi? And she doesn't let it go for the rest of the episode.
She's very jealous.
But she's like, okay, well, what did you learn from Dr. Bambi? He's like, well, maybe the pyramids are just a tribute to giant dung heaps. Another fucking poop reference.
Well, I love Mulder's soliloquy here to Scully about how he hates insects and that he was like climbing.
He's not afraid of them. Yeah. He hates them, but why does he hate them?
He hates them because he saw like this a leaf crawling towards him or whatever. It turned out he had a praying mantis epiphany, and he had a scream. He screamed, not a girly scream.
Yeah,
That's
he was
important.
very clear. It was
Yeah,
not a girly scream.
not a girly scream, but that he saw like the horror of like I don't. How did he describe it? He says like almost like it goes to his soul or something, like the grandiose nature horror of the world or something in this little praying mantis. It's so funny. It's so funny. And then Scully's like, "You sure it wasn't a girly scream?"
Yep. So what? And then he hears one of the tenants, the other tenants in the hotel, scream. Mulder hangs up
Yeah.
on Scully again, and he finds Mr. Miyagi dead in a diaper covered in roaches.
Oh, that dude. I wrote on here like the first time we see that guy laying in his bed, it's his feet and the roach is like sort of crawling up the bed. Did you see the nails on his foot? That was
Glad
the
I
grossest thing in this entire episode. That guy's nails were like sickly yellow and like curling up. It was gross.
I am really glad I did not look that closely
It was
because
so nasty.
toes do ook me out. Bad toes or do ook me out.
Oh.
All right. So I'm glad we talked about that. So he finds Mr. Miyagi in a diaper, dead, covered in roaches. We confirmed that Jankum was consumed by those kids because they did the laboratory test and found that they were huffing poop. They Mulder looks in a trap in the dude's room, or maybe his own room, little roach motel, and finds part of one of these bugs.
Yeah.
Whole, not crushed. So he brings it to Bambi or Dr. Bambi, and she's like, "Is there something wrong or weird about this bug?" And she's like, "I'll say he's hung like a club-tailed dragonfly." She's just remarking that his phallus is huge.
Yeah.
And under the microscope, it reveals that this bug is a robot. It actually is made of metal. It's a piece of technology. And we come to find out that she's like, and there's a robot builder who builds fake insects here in town, and I've always wanted to talk to him. Like, okay, that's really convenient.
Even Mulder says, like, he's in this town. Of course he is.
All right. So we got what's it? He goes and visits the dude for some reason that has a voice but has to talk through one of those voice boxes. He finds that he just programs bugs, and one of them takes a liking to Mulder, starts following him around.
Yeah, because the scientist mentions that AI, because this is another early discussion of AI in the show, where the problem with AI is that scientists are trying to use or mimic it on human brains, and human brains think too much. And so he's like, you got to do it on the insect brain, because the insect brain, I think even Bambi was like, all they ever do is they like eat, sleep, shit, and fuck. Like Mulder, she doesn't use the word fuck, obviously, like procreate or something. And Mulder's just like gazing into her nipples the entire time she's talking about this.
I can work with this.
Yeah.
We get a scene where there's this COVID level panic at a grocery store. There's a car crash that scares the shit out of Scully. And the only reason I can remark it is recently on the internet, I saw this little thing that was actually a car crash they didn't intend, but it looked so good, they just kept it in the episode.
What was awesome is Gillian Anderson didn't break character. The crash happened, and she just kept rolling with it.
Professional.
Yeah.
So many screams, they're all going to be bleeding out of their nipples.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of, like, two ladies fight over the last bottle of poison for bugs. They knock over a bunch of milk duds. Milk duds cause they're roaches. Everybody bails. Then we cut back to Mulder's for some reason drinking scotch with his scientist.
Well, the scientist, when Mulder shows him the robotic roach, the scientist freaks out. He's like, "It's beyond my comprehension." And then when they cut back to him, both of them are sitting there drinking scotch because they're so like, "That's heavy shit." And then Mulder's just like, "Well, thanks, Doc." Gets up and leaves. Like, does not care that this guy's entire like worldview has been completely destroyed. He thought he was the smartest guy in the world, and it turns out like he's nothing.
And so we cut back to what is it? He goes to Dr. Bambi. Scully calls and Mulder says the wildest shit he's ever said on an episode to date. I didn't write what he said. But Scully remarks that because of the crazy shit he's talking about aliens and being invaded by bugs, that he may have been in town too long.
Yeah.
He wants to track down the guy from the pre title screen role that was getting the bugs exterminated in the basement because he's some methane investigator, and he may have been responsible for importing not only poop because he was the only licensed poop importer in town, but he may have accidentally got these cockroaches out there. So he goes out to this poop plant full of explosive methane gas, and the dude is going batshit insane.
Yeah.
He's like, there are bugs everywhere. I got a pistol. He thinks Mulder is a cockroach at some point. And it confirms, like, he hears this chittering, like almost, what do you call that? They rub their little legs together, crickets noise.
Yeah.
And he's mad about that. And then all of a sudden, Mulder's like phone starts ringing, and it's making a similar-ish sound. So he starts shooting at him.
He's like, "You're one of them."
And he blows up this whole plant.
Well, there's a funny scene before the plant starts blowing up. That's when Scully pulls up next to Bambi. So like Bambi's sitting in the passenger seat of Mulder's car, just waiting outside, and then Scully finally pulls up, and the look Gillian Anderson gives this woman, like you could just tell, like she if she could, she would just shoot Bambi dead right then and there. And then like Bambi's like, "Should I come in there with you?" And Scully's like, "Nah, this is no place for an entomologist," as she pulls out her gun right in front of Bambi. But yeah, that
whole place blows up.
Yeah.
They get covered in poop.
Oh, yeah.
They stand up from behind. After the plant blows up, they both stand up. They both have poop on their faces, and Mulder says, "Crap."
Yeah.
Later, they're like, the cops are showing up. They're investigating what's going on. That sheriff from earlier like walks up and says, "You look pooped."
What's also hilarious about this is I don't know how much time has passed. They never once were offered a towel to wipe off with, anything. They've just been at that crime scene covered in shit. It's all over their trench coats. I mean, they're covered in shit. And they don't even attempt to clean themselves. And I love the very end when I don't remember what Scully said exactly, but she's basically, mocking Mulder for all of this, and then he's like, "I never thought I'd say this to you, Scully, but you smell bad." Just walked away from her. We forgot to mention the fourth wall breaking moment when Mulder's talking to, I think it's the scientist, right? And then the cockroach crawls across the screen.
Yeah.
But it looks like it's outside of the actual frame, whatever. And that's
it makes it look like there's a bug crawling across your television set.
Super cool.
And yeah, that freaked me out. I'm like, oh god, if I had seen that back in the 90s.
Yeah, then we just get Mulder sort of wrapping up. He's typing up his story, I guess.
Oh well, like the robot guy shows up and like sweeps Dr. Bambi off of her feet, despite being in her wheelchair and taken off.
That's what causes Scully to mock Mulder about it.
Yeah, and Scully's like, "Smart is sexy. Maybe their Uber children will save us from the next alien invasion." And then we get Mulder doing the Doogie Howser narrating over typing in a computer. He sees a big ass beetle like on his plate, and he's about to smash it.
I
And he
think
has
that's
the
a
good,
Madagascar hissing cockroach, I think.
but he has the good sense to wait for it to not be on his muffins when he
Oh,
splats that thing with a handful of X Files.
you know it's been crawling all over that muffin, though, shitting all over it. And
He,
they go out of their way to show him picking up a piece of it and sticking it in his mouth and chewing on it. It was
I,
crawling all over it. It was shitting all over that muffin, Jeremy.
and now he's allergic to poop. But that is the end of the episode.
Yeah, and there's that cool little moment where Mulder's talking about, he mentions to Scully earlier on where this could have been like if you're an advanced civilization, maybe what you would do is you would send a robotic thing here to a planet that just constantly shits all the time and like all of this stuff. And when he's typing up his little report or whatever there, he pauses for a moment because he's like looking at it like maybe this is an intelligent life form from outer space or something, and then he immediately, as soon as it starts crawling towards him, just smashes the shit out of it.
Yep.
Your thoughts on this episode?
It was funny. It was fun. It was enjoyable. It ooked me out the whole time I was watching it. This episode was definitely gross. And if you're squeamish, particularly about bugs, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I thought this episode was great. So much better. I watched 4 of these back to back, so maybe I was looking for something just way better than the last episode. But this was like a palate cleanser for me. I mean, it's all about poop, so not really a poop palate cleanser, but just I thought it was hilarious. I love that moment when Mulder keeps hanging up on Scully, whatever, and it's the moment when she hears the scream and he's like, "Gotta go" or whatever, and he hangs up. And when they cut back to Scully, you see her in bed sleeping, and she's literally got the phone on her head waiting for his call to make sure he's okay. And I'm just like, all those little things throughout this episode were just so funny. Mulder just having the hots for Bambi. Clearly, they got that great scene when it's like the camera's looking up through the magnifying glass, whatever, and it's just their face. You see Mulder's eyeballs just like staring at her. And Scully's jealousy of this girl, like Bambi. Her name is Bambi. It's so funny. It's good. It's another excellent episode written by Darren Morgan. So definitely worth watching for sure. So here's some fun facts. Writer Darren Morgan was inspired to write the episode after he saw the cover of a magazine that featured insect-like robots designed by roboticist and author Rodney Brooks. Morgan also was inspired by Orson Welles' 1938 radio broadcast The War of the Worlds, which caused mass hysteria, with the episode's title being a direct reference to the novel, with the last part of the episode's title, Coprophages, referring to a dung eater. The town featured in the episode also takes place in Miller's Grove. It's a play on Grover's Mill, the setting of Orson Welles' 1938 radio adaptation. Originally, a scene featuring the sheriff discussing a noted case of hysteria from the 30s was planned to be included in the final episode, but was cut due to time. The episode, like Morgan's previous effort, the second season's Humbug, used a great deal of humor, including an in-joke where Scully reads Breakfast at Tiffany's, referencing a question on Jeopardy that had been asked when David Duchovny appeared on the show. The show's animal trainer, Debbie Cove, used around 300 cockroaches for the production of this episode. And of these hundreds, only one died during the filming, although it was due to old age. Director Kim Manners was very pleased with the way the cockroaches acted, noting that, quote, every shot I wanted to get, they got, unquote. Cast and crew members humorously recalled that Manners even began giving orders to the insects, with cinematographer John Bartley saying, quote, when I saw Kim Manners talking to a bucket of cockroaches, that was a highlight for me, end quote. Now, the episode came under heavy criticism by the Standards and Practices Department at parent network Fox, who took exception to the initial script's heavy use of words such as crap and poop to refer to the excrement that episode's cockroaches fed upon. Darren Morgan later attacked and parodied this approach in the 21st episode of the second season of the American crime thriller television series Millennium, called Somehow Satan Got Behind Me. In the episode, a network censor again targets the use of the word crap and storms onto the set of a show resembling The X-Files being taped, featuring lookalikes of Mulder and Scully. The episode marks a rare occasion in the series in which the fourth wall is broken. Although no character addresses the audience, a cockroach scurries across the screen, scaring the viewer into thinking that an actual insect is crawling on their television. The cast and crew of the show enjoyed the episode for the most part. Co-producer Paul Rabman said the episode had some of the funniest material in the X-Files, as well as some of the most horrific, such as a scene where a cockroach crawled into someone's arm. Gillian Anderson rated the episode one of her favorite episodes of the third season. And on a more negative note, writer Darren Morgan ended up being unhappy with the final product, saying, "The other day, my girlfriend was saying, I never understood that episode, and I guess I don't either. It was an episode that had a lot of what I thought was really good ideas and never quite got it to work. I was really disappointed with that episode. Some people love it." Frass is the specific term for insect poop, which is Sheriff Frass's name. And so there's another poop reference. The car crash in front of the supermarket that Scully enters was not scripted. Gillian Anderson's reaction to it was completely genuine, but she stayed in character and continued the scene as if nothing had happened. And Mulder's attraction to Dr. Bambi Berenbaum caused a flood of negative fan reaction that he would consider any woman other than Scully. So
she was a smoke show, internet nerds. Are you kidding me?
So there you go, folks. That is our review, discussion of War of the Coprophages. Definitely a fun episode, worth a watch. Super, super cool. So stay tuned next week. Hit that like and subscribe if you're into what we do here. Thank you for all of you who are commenting on the various episodes here and there. We read all the comments. Let us know what you think of War of the Coprophages. What do you think of cockroaches in general? Are they misunderstood? Let us know in the comments below. Say goodbye, Jeremy. Take the poop out of this episode.
No, that's it. It's remember the last episode. Remember that poop is your palate cleanser.